If you're struggling with your work-life balance and just can't seem to manage your many responsibilities well without sacrificing self-care, you're not alone. May I suggest our Life Balance Planner, which Book Authority listed as one of the top work-life balance resources to be released in 2021. It's a 3-month, undated planner with a uniquely integrated life balance tracking system, as well as self-care planning for your daily, weekly, and monthly routine. For a limited time, you can purchase your first planner for 30% off at paulwcroswell.com using promo code PODPLANNER. That's Pod Planner, no spaces. We're also rolling out a new feature where for just $1.90 a week, you never have to worry about buying a new planner again. How amazing is that? With this subscription, we'll send you a new planner every 3 months before your current planner fills up. To get your planner today, visit paulwcroswell.com/planner. Act now, okay? Let's dive in.
And I wasn't getting anywhere. So I just started wandering the halls. I'm kind of sobbing to myself. And my poor husband's like, I don't know what to do. And we're walking through the halls, and I find one little professor in a little cubicle, and his lights on. And I timidly knock on the door and ask if I can, invite myself in. And he says, what do you want? I said, well, and of course he could look at me and see that I wasn't 23 years old. And I said, well, I live 100 miles away and I work full time and I'm ready to come back and get my PhD. And he sat me down and he said, there's no way that you're going to be able to do this. It's too much. I know. And I looked at him, I was like, you don't understand. You have no idea who I am. You have no idea what I've been through. You have no idea what I'm capable of. And I left, and I was just a basket case. Paul, I cried and cried and cried because it was like one of my life goals, right?
Yeah.
And here was a perfect opportunity, and I had the support of so many people, and my dreams were just crushed.
Welcome to the Paul Croswell audio experience.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Paul Croswell, and I do hope you have been having a great day so far. We're in for a special episode with Dr. Katie Nall, spelled N-A-L-L. And here's a question for you. Have you ever been in a position where you could have really used some quick tricks for stress reduction that actually works? If you answered yes, then this episode is especially for you, because although my guest today has earned her PhD in mathematics education and is a TEDx speaker, she's also an advanced master trainer and certified practitioner in emotional freedom technique, also known as tapping, which she uses to help others dissolve their waffles. Yes, you heard that right. Waffles. And I'm going to leave you in suspense on that and what it means because I think it's worth the wait. In our conversation, Dr. Katie shares about her journey in earning her PhD just days before her 60th birthday, her popular TED Talk, how she uses the emotional freedom technique to help her students overcome anxiety around math and testing, not to mention her live demonstration of this technique on me. It was wild and illuminating. I hope you're ready for this one. Dr. Katie, welcome to the show. How are you?
Reverend Croswell, thank you so much.
So what's interesting is I think very few people know I used to be a pastor. And so it's always, and it's very, even fewer people know that I used to be a rapper. So it's a very interesting whenever I have conversations with someone who have discovered that, like if they found it somewhere, it's not really hidden. But it makes the conversation so much more fun for me because it keeps me on the tip of my seat. I like to start each of my conversations by simply asking, how are you today? How have your day been going?
Oh, well, thank you so much. And do you prefer Reverend Croswell or do you prefer Paul?
Paul is fine. Whatever you're comfortable with, I will work with. I
Okay.
honestly, I'm not bothered by any at all, but I'm more than comfortable with just Paul.
The only thing I couldn't find was your stage name as your rapper. So you're gonna have to share that a little bit later.
I will maybe off air. I'll share it with you and embarrass
Oh, it's an
myself a
off-air
little
one.
bit.
Woo! So, Paul, first of all, thank you for asking. So few times do we ask one another, "How was your day?" and we actually really listen. So I'm going to tell you who my day was, and then I'm going to tell you a short story. Is that all right?
Yes, please. That's what I
Okay.
want.
So my day was amazing. I woke up on time. And I looked at the clock. It was 4:44. That's always a good sign, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah. I got a lot of work done in the morning, and then I went and taught my qigong class. I teach qigong. I came back. Well, I had my lemon water, my celery juice, taught qigong, and came back, and then I just got finished with my green curry lunch. So it's an amazing day. The little story that I want to tell you is that I had the opportunity to go to one of Marianne Williams' conferences a number of years ago, and there was a fabulous speaker there who was talking about how uh, one another greet each other in his country. And I loved what they asked. The question was, "How are your children?"
Oh
And
wow.
right? Does that like just change the whole scope of things? So
Absolutely.
so I'm gonna ask you, and I don't even know if you have children, I didn't dig that deep, but do you have children? And if you do, how are they?
So I don't yet have children. However, my I like to consider my inner children, like my inner child, right?
Oh,
And
I
caring
love
for my
that.
inner child. And I'm learning to actively care for my inner child, to be more open to doing fun things that it's
Oh,
not productive. It's not, not productive in a sense of like getting things checked off my list, but it's just to care for myself. And that's something I'm actively learning to do. And I
so
appreciate you asking.
I love 2 things. One is that when you're um, uh, checking in on your inner child, make sure you listen to your inner child. And I get that. I'm a type A. Like I got a list. You should see my list for today. It's crazy. Um, but make sure on your list you add celebrate and enjoyment. And then you can cross it off your list. And then you can feel good about doing it.
I could tell already. I'm going to love this conversation. I absolutely love your energy. I really do. I really do. Uh, how are your children?
Oh, thank you for asking. We have 3 grown children. They're all out of jail. They're all alive, and they're all off our payroll. So woohoo! And they
Sounds
have
like
married.
success.
Yeah, I know. And they have married the people I prayed for when they were in middle school. Somebody
That's
told
so
me,
wonderful.
right? Somebody told me that when my kids were in middle school, that their mates were out there and I could pray that they would meet. And each of the kids have got just different personalities. So I prayed that somebody for this personality and this for each of the personalities, and they all found each other. So not only do we have 3 children who still speak to us, but
Yeah.
we also love their mates and we love their families times 3. Who does that? I mean, we got so
Wow.
lucky. So, and we're actually going to go see our oldest one tomorrow. He lives about an hour away. His birthday is on Thursday, and his wife just got a promotion, and she's flying back from India. We'll probably have jet lag and not be able to, celebrate the birthday. So we thought we'd
Yeah.
go down and woohoo, put a party hat on.
That's so cool. And
Yeah.
you're still in Florida?
Yes, sir. We're in Florida. We're on the East Coast, about halfway between Cape Canaveral and West Palm. One of our sons lives in West Palm. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I lived in Florida many years ago when I was younger. Um like in Miami, in like the Everglades, not
Oh
Everglades,
wow,
goodness gracious. Uh
wow.
I'm not gonna remember now, but it's somewhere in Miami we lived. It was a lot of fun. I like visiting Florida these
Yeah.
days. My wife and I, we love driving now. We're in South Carolina now.
Oh, South Carolina. We passed through South Carolina on the way to our other son who's in North Carolina. Mhm.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
All right. So You mentioned this. I was going to ask you about it much later on, but since you mentioned it, I'd love to dive into it a little bit. Qigong.
Ah, yes.
I'm not super familiar, but I'm excited to learn. I mean, this is what, like an 8,000-year-old practice? Can you elaborate a little bit on what it is and how'd you end up becoming a master practitioner?
Oh, I'm not a master. I'm just an instructor. But yeah,
Okay.
I could talk for about an hour on Qigong, and we could actually do some exercises if you wanted. um, so Qigong was developed about 8,000 years ago. There are 9,000 varieties of Qigong.
Wow.
So Qigong is like an umbrella program, and you probably have heard of Tai Chi, Kung Fu, acupuncture, acupressure. Those are all derivatives of Qigong.
Really?
Yeah, it came from China, and it's all based on traditional Chinese medicine meridians.
Yeah.
And the concept behind Qigong is that that we can heal our organs by healing the energy that travels through our organs. So it's
Mm,
slightly different from Western medicine, but
yeah.
they complement one another. So they're good that way. I ended up I was at a national convention. Can you tell I go to conventions a lot? I was at a national
I'm a little
convention.
envious.
Yeah. And at 6 in the morning, they said they had an exercise. So I'm an early riser. I went down to the room fully expecting them to do yoga or stretches or something. And this guy was doing this really weird stuff, but I'm like, okay, if it's an exercise, I'll do it. But he told me something really cool that you might want to know, Paul, that when you're someplace and it's hard to concentrate, so like as I continue talking, it may be hard to concentrate. That you can do this
No.
you can do this exercise. So I'm not bending my arm, but usually you'd bend your arm, and with your hand straight up, you would just kind of with the side of your other hand, you just kind of move it back and forth, or you can scratch it back and forth, and that will wake you up. And I was like,
Wow.
so I found out all of these, and I'm inherently lazy. So whenever I can find shortcuts to things, I get really excited. And so I was like, oh, this is cool. This is better than having to go out and get a cup of coffee or, a soda or something. I'm going to start trying this.
Can I
So
just tell you this morning, I literally was having a conversation with myself. Like, there has to be a way for me to get myself alert without going to get a cup of coffee.
yes,
That is
I
so
can help you
amazing.
with that. I can help you with that. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so so there's all these cool things you can do with Qigong. Well, we downsized. We had a five bedroom, 3 bath house on 5 acres because my mother-in-law lived with us. Um, and when she died and the kids left, we had this big empty house. So we downsized and we moved to another part of town. And
Yeah.
as I'm driving past one of the rec centers, the big changing sign says Qigong. And I was like, I've never heard of this. And now here it is in my backyard. How cool is that? So I started going to classes, and, because I'd only gotten to it once at the convention. And I started going to classes. The more I went to classes, I was like, I don't know what this is, but I always feel really good afterwards. And then the pandemic hit.
Oh,
When the pandemic hit, I was working at a college. I was the campus director at a branch campus for our state college. And we went to flexible schedules because we couldn't go in.
yeah.
Well, they started having Qigong classes on the beach every morning. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go to this, right? And so I was able to increase the number of classes I was going to. I found out the instructor was offering classes on how to be an instructor, and I was like, done. So I spent most of the pandemic going through these classes and filling out the tests and everything else. So now I can teach others. So I actually go to a church and teach people there, and anybody
Yeah.
can come in. And then I'm at a fitness center, I'm at the museum, and I'm at different places around town. And it's so amazing. You know what it's about, Paul? It's about exercising your internal organs.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And one of my life goals is to dance at every one of our 5 granddaughters' weddings. Well, the youngest one is 2 years old. That
Yeah.
means I have to stay alive for probably another 30 years, and I have to stay healthy, and I have to learn how to dance. So those are my those are my goals.
I mean, those are pretty big goals to keep you active, right? There's more than enough motivation there.
Yeah, absolutely. But Qigong is just amazing, amazing exercise. And there's lots of videos online. Just go to YouTube, and there's some really talented people
Yeah.
that you can learn from and do them. And even if you do like 5 or 6 minutes a day, it can make a difference. Now, in terms of being alert without coffee, okay,
I'm all
so
ears.
yeah. So in the mornings, start with a 16-ounce glass of lemon water. That's a way to kickstart your liver that has been resting and working pretty much throughout the night. 16 ounces of lemon water to get started. Now, if you're really dedicated, you can go on and get 16 ounces of celery juice. But if you just want to avoid coffee, it turns out that eating an apple will stimulate you more than the coffee. Because with the coffee, you may get stimulated for a while and then there's a crash.
Yeah.
But doing an apple, there's another thing you can do. There's a point on your lower earlobe that you can squeeze. So when you get tired, you can just kind of squeeze back down there too.
That's amazing. I'm going to try that tomorrow morning because, like you, I'm an early riser. So I am up at 5, and if I happen to have gone to bed late, I'm generally not, aiming to push it beyond my wake up time. So I feel it, and it's a drag in the morning if I don't have coffee. And sometimes I'll have a cup, but other times I'm just like, I just can't. I really don't want that right now.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of drag myself through.
And
It's torturous.
yeah, they say for every cup of coffee you drink, you should follow it up with twice the amount of water because coffee is such a dehydrator.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you need the
Yeah, it's
water.
not something that's good for my system at all. At all.
Mhm.
So with you teach now, when you teach, is it local? Uh, are you is it like a free thing that people are just showing up to, or are they signing up, or they're in paying to be a part of that? I want for the listeners, especially those who are in your area, if they're like, man, I want to dive into this, to be able to find you.
So the Qigong classes that I teach on Tuesdays at Asbury Methodist Church, anyone can come, and it's just a free will offering. So if you can't afford it, come anyway. If you can afford it, that's great, and just come. And then on Wednesdays and Thursday mornings, I teach at Christie Fitness Center, and you're a member at any of these places. If you come, the first time is free, just to come and experience it, right?
Yeah.
And in October on Tuesday nights, I'll be teaching at Environmental Learning Center, and on Wednesday nights, I'll be teaching again at the Vero Beach Museum of Art. I did have an online session, but I couldn't tell if people were watching it or not. And so I was like, why am I videotaping myself doing this? But if there were enough people online who wanted to do it, I was offering it like Sunday night because statistics show that the greatest number of heart attacks are first thing Monday morning as people return to work.
Wow.
And so I thought offering it on Sunday night to kind of allow people a chance to let their body get into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest, and to calm down in case they might be getting anxious about returning to work.
Yeah. I love that. I think it says so much about both your passion for knowledge, in terms of being informed about something like that, but then also your application. So, because in my opinion, there are a lot of folks who are really excited about knowledge for knowledge's sake, and that's wonderful if you just love learning. Um, I love it when you love learning, but you love applying what you learn as you learn it. Like that's where I find my passion. I love to learn. I spend a lot of time watching TED Talks, which we're going to talk about, and as well as other things. But the excitement in that for me is the application of it, and just I really love that. So let's dive a little bit into your story, jumping back a little bit. you have your doctorate in mathematics education, and fun story you included on your website, you received that doctorate just before your 60th birthday.
Yeah.
So awesome. And I have conversations with people all the time, and there's this terror of, when it comes to going back to school, and they're like, I don't know if I can do it. It's so much. I don't know if I can handle it. And here you are. Would you talk a little bit about that journey? What was that like for you?
Well, great question, Paul. When I was 18 years old, I made a list of things I wanted to accomplish by the time I was 25. Can you tell I'm a list maker from way back? And number one on my list was by the time I was 25, I was going to earn my PhD. Now, interestingly enough, I had no idea what a PhD was, but I
That's
had heard
amazing.
that was the highest level you could get. And I was raised in poverty. I was not going to do that to myself anymore. And so I thought, when I looked around at other people, it seemed like everybody else had more education than we did. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna do that. That's going to be my goal. I probably should have said make $1 million, but anyway, it doesn't matter. I digress.
Not too
The
late to
sec-
add that to the list.
I know, I
It's a
know.
growing
Well,
list.
I'll add it. I'll add it. Number two was I said I was going to purchase a house. And I remember putting in parentheses, I didn't care if I had furniture or not. Now, why would I want to purchase a house by the time I was 25? We moved. I was the oldest child of a single mom, and we moved a lot. I went to 12 different schools in 5 different states, moving about every 6 months.
Wow.
So the idea of having a house was like really important to me. And
Yeah.
number three, I said I was going to have a car and it was going to be paid for. All my life, I was raised, we didn't have credit cards back then. It was like 100 years ago. Um, but what they did have was layaway. So I never was able to buy anything. I had to put things on layaway and give $1 or $2. So to have a car and have it paid for was going to be my other goal. Cannot remember what number 4 was, but I know it had nothing to do with marriage or children. And I know that's one of your topics is marriage. But number 5, I remember saying that when I was 18 years old, when I turned 25, my next goal was I was going to begin dating. That was my goal.
Yeah.
Now, let me tell you what actually happened. By the time I was 25, I did not have my PhD, but I was working on my master's in statistics. So I kind of I give a little check. I did not buy a house, but I was a manager at a place in our college town. And so I was kind of like, I'll give myself partial credit. I did have a car that was completely paid for. It was a 1973 TR6, bright red,
Ooh,
British
nice.
Leyland. And I had it for 45 years. And when I sold it, it was still running.
Wow.
Number 4, I can't remember. And remember what number 5 was? I was going to begin dating by the time I was 25.
Uh-huh.
By the time I was 25, I'd been married 5 years and pregnant with my first. Did you hear
Aw.
me mention children anywhere in that? As it turned out, my husband had a list, and his list he had a lot more confidence in his list than I did in my list. So there's that. So by the time my youngest child, we had 3 children, by the time my youngest child was 25, I was working at a college. I was the administrator at a college.
Yeah.
And at college, they honor PhDs. It's like a big deal. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be any position in the college. And we actually had receptionists who were at the college who had their PhDs. But they
Wow.
honor, yeah. So, it's a big deal to get your PhD. So I looked around, and it's like all the kids were gone. Things were kind of smooth sailing. It seemed like, and I thought, oh, maybe I could get my PhD now. So I went to my supervisor and said, hey, you're used to me working like at 150%. What would you think if I went back to school? I'd have to dial it back a little bit. And he said, oh, do it, because obviously it'd make his division look better, right?
Yeah.
I went to my husband and I said, well, what do you think? And because we'd been married for a number of years, he said, it doesn't matter what I think. You're going to do whatever it is you want to do anyway. And I thought, oh, smart man. But he
Sounds
did
like a
say,
very smart man.
yeah, he did say he'd pick up the slack. And I went to all the kids and said, no marriages, no babies. I got to focus. Nobody heard that. There were 2 weddings in the middle of all it. Oh my God. Anyway, so I went to a university here in Florida that was a 2-hour drive away because it was a state university. And I made an appointment with the dean and everything and explained the situation. And when I came in for my appointment, the entire department was empty. Nobody was there except for a lone secretary. And I said, I have an appointment with Dr. So-and-so. And she said, oh, yes, he told me you might be coming in. I'm like, might? I took a day off vacation. My husband took a day off. This is like really important to me.
Yeah,
And she said, he told me I could answer any of your questions. I said, really?
that's different.
Okay. So I started asking questions. She couldn't answer any of my questions.
Oh my
Now,
gosh.
Paul, this was my life goal for like 50 years.
Yeah.
And and I wasn't getting anywhere. So I just started wandering the halls. I'm kind of sobbing to myself. And my poor husband's like, I don't know what to do. And we're walking through the halls, and I find one little professor in a little cubicle, and his lights on, and I timidly knock on the door and ask if I can, invite myself in. And he says, what do you want? I said, well, and of course he could look at me and see that I wasn't 23 years old. And I said, well, I live 100 miles away and I work full time and I'm ready to come back and get my PhD. And he sat me down and he said, there's no way that you're going to be able to do this. It's
Oh my
too much.
gosh.
I know. And I looked at him, I was like, you don't understand. You have no idea who I am. You have
Yeah.
no idea what I've been through. You have no idea what I'm capable of. And I left and I was just a basket case. Paul, I cried and cried and cried because it was like one of my life goals, right?
Yeah.
And here was a perfect opportunity. And I had the support of so many people, and my dreams were just crushed. So I went home and arranged my pity party. It's a big deal. I mean, I get balloons and everything. I got my little pity party going. And
Wait, are you talking literal balloons? Okay, I was literally picturing a party like, no, 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 we're going to process this together, because we were gonna dive into that.
I just when I have my pity parties, I have to give them a beginning and end time, or else I could just like go right into there.
I hear you on that.
And I try to invite people, but nobody wants to come. I mean,
It's a
party
hard
poopers.
party to fill.
I know, party poopers. So so I had my little pity party, and then I thought, well, what am I going to do? Because the whole idea of going to a state college, obviously, is they have a great education, but the cost, right?
Yeah.
That's huge. Well, up the road about 25 minutes is Florida Institute of Technology, a private institution. And I thought, I have no idea. I have to ask. I don't know how much it's going to cost or whatever it is. So I went and checked it out, and it was very, very expensive. But you know what? I called them on a holiday, and on the holiday, the dean answered the phone, not the assistant,
Wow.
the dean answered the phone. I told him what I was thinking about, and he said, you sound like a perfect candidate for us. Why don't you come speak to us? When would be a convenient time for you to come meet with us? Talk about
Wow.
customer service, right?
Such a difference.
What night and day. And I'm like, at this point, I don't care how much it costs. I'm going there. So I went and spoke to this very nice gentleman who laid everything out, what needed to be done, told me how much it was going to cost. And then I remembered that when we first moved to Florida, I taught classes there in statistics. So I went and checked out. It turns out when you teach there, you get a class for free. So I was like, okay, my first class is paid for. That's great. Now I have time to figure it out. I pulled this and that and the other together. I'd gotten by my second class, the instructor said, do you know anybody who might want a scholarship? And I'm like, me, pick me, pick me, pick me. And I applied, and I was the third person on the list because other people, they just felt like they were more deserving. And the day before the deadline, they called me and said, the other two didn't need the scholarship. Would you like it? I was like, oh
Wow.
my gosh. So I was able to pay for it. I drove in the dark after work, completely exhausted. I had to invest in a little recorder because I couldn't hear a word they were saying because I was
Yeah.
dead to the world, right? And then I'd come home and try to process it and on my lunch breaks and everything, go through it. But let me tell you, for all your listeners who are older, going to school as a mature adult is so much easier. I mean, it's like exponentially easier. Now, why? Well, when I was younger and going to school, I had to make sure I looked right because, I might be dating and I was worried about this and I was worried about that. And I didn't know what I was going to do in my life and everything. But, as an adult, a lot of those questions you have that are in your way of education are already answered. So
Yeah.
you can focus. And you know so much more about yourself. You know whether you can study better in the dark or in light. You can study better with music or in silence. You know how to prepare for things that you didn't know when you were in your late teens, early 20s. It is so much easier as an adult going back to school. So I went back. I got all A's. I got 1B. Oh, still. I finished
You
my
sound like my older sister.
yeah,
Dude.
same
Oh
thing.
yeah. I think I don't know. I don't know if she'll be mad at me for putting this out there, but I think the first B she got, she actually cried like real tears.
Oh, me
She was
too.
distraught.
Yeah. When I was in college, the first B I got, I went into the bathroom and just cried my eyes out and went back to the professor, and he had no sympathy whatsoever. He said, here, I give 1A, I give 2Bs, I give most of people. I mean, he was definitely a bell curve. And
Wow.
yeah. And I was like, oh my God. Anyway, so yeah, me and your sister were like that way. But I wrote my 399-page dissertation. And I can't believe anybody's going to read it, because who's going to read
Well,
399?
if you don't mind me asking, what was it on?
I have no idea. I'd have to look it up.
And I mean, no pressure. I was just curious.
No, it was what we did. For those of you who are out there and you want to get your PhD, I'm going to give you a huge, huge hint. Huge. It's something I resisted the whole time. And now that I finished it, I was like, oh my God, everybody should be doing this. I studied, I was looking for ways to help students overcome fear and anxiety about math, right? That was my goal. So I was going in one direction and I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be exciting. We're going to do an experiment. We're going to be able to, I'm going to make my stake in the academic world, right? And my instructor came up to me and he said, well, Katie, I'm thinking that maybe you could do what's called a replication study from my other student 2 years ago. And I was insulted. Oh, a replication study. Now, what is a replication study? A replication study is you take one study that was done recently and you replicate most of it. You change maybe one, maybe two variables. And in your replication study, you'll either be able to confirm the results or say, in this instance, it didn't work. As insulted as I was, I also know enough about politics to understand that if I'm doing the research project that my advisor is interested in, he's going to pay a lot more attention to me than if I go off in the direction I want to.
Yeah.
And I kept hearing over and over again, your dissertation is your first paper. And I was like, okay, I'll put this other stuff aside for later. When you do a replication study, there's 5 components to a dissertation, and one of them is research, and that's usually the one that bogs everyone down. But Paul, here's the secret. When you do a replication study, the research has already been done. You just have to research from the time that was published to now. So your research is much smaller. They already have the experimental design laid out. You just have to, it's like plug and play, and you get it done. Now, there was a cohort of 5 of us that were going through. One didn't get past the, two didn't get past the, 1, 2, 3. One didn't get past the written test. One just didn't finish at all. One was determined to make her stake and do the academic thing. And then the other 2 was me and another lady who was just a little bit younger than me. And we got done first.
Yeah.
The one who wanted to make her stake in the academic world, it was 3 years after I was finished that she finished.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyone out there who's thinking about getting a PhD or is in a PhD program, one, consider a replication study, and two, hook up with an advisor. Don't hook up. Forget the two words. Find find the advisor who has already published a number of different dissertations, because they will know the tricks of the trade and will get you through easier.
Yeah, I love that, and thank you for sharing that. And my follow-up question was going to be, what advice would you give to someone who is looking to go back to school later in life that may be afraid of it, but I really think you've equipped them with a lot. And
Yeah.
if anyone's listening and that was your struggle, I really hope you feel encouraged. Um, and if you need a little more encouragement by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly where to connect with Dr. Katie. So just stick around for the rest of the conversation. Um, Now, I do want to switch gears a little bit and talk about emotional wealth. Emotional wealth. Uh, I want to talk about waffles and dissolving people's waffles. And if you're listening and you're like, what in the world just happened to this conversation? Give it like 2 minutes and it'll make perfect sense. And you're gonna love this as much as I am. But would you elaborate a little bit on waffles and the dissolving waffles for me, Dr. Katie?
Sure, sure. Well, let me go back to emotional wealth. And I want to let you know that I'm fully equipped to be able to speak about emotional wealth because I lived in emotional debt most of my life.
So good.
What I did is my focus was work. Because to me, if I worked hard, I'd make money. If I made money, I'd have security. And if I had security, I'd have happiness. That was my logic thinking.
Yeah.
It was not right for me, but that's the way I thought. So I thought the harder I work, the more I would have money and the more secure I'd be and the more happy I'd be. The harder I worked, the more emotionally in debt I became because I
Mm,
would spend my entire day putting everything out at work. And then I would come home emotionally bankrupt
yeah.
for my husband and my kids.
Yeah.
And I had nothing to give. I was just like wiped out. And so, in recognizing that, I started saying, whoa, I've got to identify what gives me emotional wealth and what is the cause of my emotional debt. And it got to the point where I had spreadsheets, because mathematician. Uh,
Well,
um,
I'm visual, so that makes sense to
yeah,
me.
yeah, of what gives me emotional wealth and what takes away emotional wealth. And so it was at that point that I started doing things like respectfully withdrawing from some of my volunteer activities, respectfully setting boundaries,
Yeah.
respectfully moving more and more into emotional wealth until I recognize that would be best for me to do is to be right here, right now with Paul. And that's where I get my emotional wealth. Now, emotional wealth comes from being able to dissolve your waffles.
Well, you
And
know what? Before we jump there, I do want, and everyone is like itching right now for it to explain what waffles are. I'm gonna tease you guys a little bit, but before we go there, would you, if you don't mind, just going down this road with me for a little bit? Um, I love the idea of emotional debt and emotional wealth. I think that's a concept. Quite frankly, I think that's a concept that should be taught from elementary school up. I think we would have a very, very different world if people understood that and how to care for themselves in that way. Um, but for sake of elaborating or bringing more clarity around that, what was what would you say were some of the feelings or feeling words that you would attach to being in emotional debt? Like how did you feel about yourself? How did you feel as a result of some of your relationships and so on, when you were in emotional debt? Because I think as folks are listening, there might be feeling like, well, am I in emotional debt? Is that what I'm experiencing, or am I experiencing something else? And I want to give them a little bit of a gauge to go off of.
that is an amazing question, Paul. And one I'm going to write down and consider a little bit more. I love that. In emotional debt, actually, the word that comes up is the word spent.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
completely spent, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, physically.
Yeah.
One of the talks I give is about the 8 aspects of your life, but I would just feel like I don't have any friends because I don't have time for friends.
Yeah.
My family relationships are awash because I don't have time. I don't make time for them. I wasn't keeping up with fitness. My faith life was zero,
Yeah.
because, of course, it all depends on me, right? Um,
Oh,
my
I've
fin-
been there.
yeah, my finances were, slipshod, because yeah, I'm working so hard. How can I pay attention to the finances too? Um, and even at work. So with all of my focus in at work, I was emotionally spent there too,
Yeah.
because I wanted to be so good at everything. I wanted to be the answer for everybody that people did start asking me to do everything. And I thought doing everything would get me where I wanted to go. And didn't work for me. Not for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the feeling was spent.
And I think that makes perfect sense because spent literally means you have nothing more to give. And
Exactly.
whether that's to the healthy parts of your lives, your life, or in a healthy way to just general parts of your life, you literally have nothing left to give.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things that one of the reasons I wanted to dive a little bit into that because I really think there are a lot of people who are walking around in emotional debt and they don't know it.
Exactly.
They hadn't realized it. And oftentimes we don't realize it until we're in crisis in some sort. And then it literally we are forced to deal with it as opposed to having the opportunity to deal with it when we want to. Now we have to if we're going to be healthy. And the concept of emotional deposits and emotional withdrawals, like these are not arbitrary things. These are very real and can be very tangible. I think when we talk about emotions, there are a lot of people who are almost dismissive of
Hmm.
the idea of dealing with your emotions.
Hmm.
Like it's almost a waste of time. Am I just rambling? Does that make sense?
No, no, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with
Yeah.
you. I'm with you. Yeah.
Like it just doesn't make sense to them. Like, what do you mean dealing with your emotions? Feelings, are just feelings. They come and go. And it's like, no, no, no. Emotional withdrawals are real things. And if you don't have a balance where there are deposits that are outweighing the withdrawals, then you will end up in emotional debt. I
Hmm.
absolutely love that you brought that up. And man, we could really dive into that. But for sake of not keeping people waiting, let's talk about waffles.
Well, I just want to add one thing. I think you brought up an
Sure.
excellent point, Paul. I think that in much people don't realize they're emotionally overdrawn
Mm,
in much the same way that people will write a check and not check their bank balance because, oh gosh, I have a checkbook and I have a debit card, so I should be able to just keep going. And
uh-huh.
that's because we don't stop to check in.
Yeah.
And if you don't
Yeah.
stop to check your balance, then you have no idea where you are. And we
Yeah.
don't do that emotionally. So thank you
An
for
emotional
that.
budget meeting. You know what? I think this entire conversation needs to
Right.
be a masterclass. Just
Yeah.
I'm gonna call it time with Dr. Katie. That's what I'm gonna call it. Um, but y- how and when are we doing our emotional budgeting? Who's
Yeah.
teaching us that that is a necessary part of life to live healthy and happy?
So that great question, Paul, is that the only people that can teach it are the people who have been schooled in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So parents who are emotionally overloaded can't teach it to their children. And for goodness sake, our teachers talk about emotional debt.
Yeah. Wow.
They're not going to be able to teach it. So maybe as a society, you know where we're going, right? We're going right back to that question of how are your children? And when we
Yeah.
say our children, we can be talking about our children that are in our
Collectively.
purview, how are
Yeah.
your children? And so somebody has got to say, okay, I know how to check in with your emotional balance, right? And
Yeah.
I can show you how to wipe out your debt and increase your wealth. Yeah, I love that.
I'm telling you, this is a masterclass right now, and I really am just gonna call it time with Dr. Katie. That's what I'm gonna call this. Uh, I will find a way to work that into this episode title if I'm not careful. So thank you for that masterclass. Let's continue it with waffles. For all of
Wow,
the listeners, we are officially at waffles.
it's waffle time. Um, so waffles. I'm going to tell you the story behind waffles before I tell you what waffles is. So you can
Yes,
just sit
please.
on the edge of your seats for a little bit time. I mentioned in my dissertation, I had found ways to help students overcome their fear and anxiety about math and test taking, and
Yeah.
I was all in. I had watched a 10-day summit. I had bought the book, bought the DVD, was trying it on students. It was working. It was amazing. And it was so amazing, Paul, that I would come up to nearly strangers in the street, grab them by the shoulders and say, I know you've got a problem and I can fix it. Not the best way to meet people. My enthusiasm was not well received. So then I said, okay, I'm just going to tell people what it is, and then they will be on board. So I would come up to people. I'd even talk to my relatives and say, hey, I know all about emotional freedom technique, and
Yeah.
I'm going to show you how to do it. It's called EFT or tapping. And they would look at me the same strange way as when I grabbed them by the shoulders. And when I mentioned tapping, everybody wanted me to dance. Now, I'm not a tap dancer. I was when I was 5, but I don't do it anymore. And so I was trying to figure out a way, how can I introduce this concept to people that is so powerful, so amazing, that actually eliminates their emotional debt and grows their emotional wealth?
Yeah.
And what I started thinking about is I had 12 years of working with people to help them eliminate their worries, their anxiety, their fear, frustration. Wait a minute, this is starting to spell something. So when I talk about dissolving waffles, I'm talking about showing others how to dissolve their worries, their anxiety, their fear, frustration, lethargy, exhaustion, and stress.
Yeah.
And I have a proven technique that is non-addictive, non-invasive, and can be self-administered to help people become more vibrant, become less fearful, and become way more productive in their lives.
Yeah. Well, there you have it, folks. We've officially gotten to waffles.
And if you stay tuned a few more minutes, I'll give you an example.
So yeah, let's dive into that because I've mentioned you've given multiple TED Talks, right? And one of them you really kind of dove into this. The title of that talk was A Technique to Eliminate Math Anxiety, and I really enjoyed it. It was so funny and so informative. Um, and you talked about this idea of EFT, emotional freedom technique, or tapping, and I'd never heard of it before this talk. And
Yes.
yeah, and I'm like I said, I love watching talks and listening. Like I love it, but I've never come across it before, and it got me so intrigued. I started researching it and almost distracted myself from preparing for for our conversation today because I just started. I literally started pulling up research papers on it. So, would you dive a little bit more into what exactly is EFT or tapping, and how does it work?
So I'll make, there's one quick answer. We don't know how it works. Okay, now I'm going to, I can tell you what we think is going on, but I can tell you the results.
If you struggle to reach the goals you set for yourself, the good news is it's most likely not because you're lazy or that you lack discipline. Statistically speaking, you're most likely struggling to reach your goals because your life is out of balance. In 2017, the Harvard Business Review reported that the United States spends more than $190 billion with a B, billion dollars to address the physical and psychological effects of burnout in the average working professional. And these numbers are from before the pandemic, so who knows what it is now. The point is, anyone trying to reach a goal while navigating burnout, whether consciously or subconsciously, is not set up to succeed. This was my experience until I discovered the life balance approach to reaching your goals and changing your life. This approach to reaching your goals takes into account your life balance as you work towards your goals. Subsequently, it basically guarantees success for almost any goal you're trying to reach. And I know that is a big promise, but it is very much realistic and very much possible. In my best-selling book, Life Balance, I outlined the principles of this formula. And due to popular demand, the online course for the book is now available. In this course, I walk you through each and every principle individually and how to apply it to your life. It's a self-paced course, so you can take it on your own time and go through it as quickly or as slowly as you would like. Every purchase includes a digital copy of my book, Life Balance, the Life Balance workbook in PDF format, and the Life Balance planner, also in PDF format. For a limited time, you can purchase this course at 50% off when you use promo code PODCAST. To purchase this course today, visit paulwcroswell.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
Emotional freedom technique. Well, I'll back up. There was a chiropractor by the name of Dr. Goodhart, who was able to make use of traditional Chinese medicine's meridians. There are meridians. Traditional Chinese medicine believes that there are energy flows throughout our body, and
Them, right?
yeah, meridians. If you do acupuncture or things like that, you may have heard of them.
Yeah.
And he found a way to have your body tell you answers. It's called kinesiology. And basically, there's a number of different ways you can do it. People do it with arm pressure. They do it with fingers. There's a lot of different ways. And they can look that up on their own. And so he was going into that. A medical physician who was also a psychiatrist found this work on kinesiology and used it in his practice on something called behavioral kinesiology, because he found that working with meridians, he could help patients with their issues. There was another medical physician, Dr. Oh, my mind just went off. Come back on. Anyway, there was another physician. He'll come in a minute.
It'll come back.
Yeah, he'll come back. He's got a funny name too, because it's Goodhart and Diamond. And anyway, and he was a medical psychiatrist who was trying to help his patients. And he had, in particular, one patient called Mary. And the way the story goes is that Mary was deathly afraid of water, to the point that she couldn't even drink a glass of water. She couldn't bathe her son. She was just petrified of water.
Wow.
Well, whatever the name of this guy that's going to be coming up in a few minutes, he was looking at behavioral kinesiology and said, I'm going to create something called thought field therapy. And he asked Mary, when you think of water, what emotion do you have? And she said, I have this fear. Okay. From the top of your head to the bottom of your toes, where is the fear in your body? She said, oh, when I think about water, I just have all this fear in my stomach. And he said, interesting. So I want you to think about water, and I want you to tap right under your eyes, because his research has shown that one of the meridians that goes to your stomach is right under your eye. And so she tapped under her eyes for less than a minute, stood up, took a drink of water, and said, great, I'm cured, goodbye.
Oh my gosh.
The physician was like, what just happened? And she had been his patient for months with no progress. And here, like that, she's fine. What in the world's going on? So he developed an entirely involved and expensive system called thought field therapy that he sold to other psychiatrists, psychologists, and therapists. And they bought it for like 5 and 6 figures because it worked. And so people were very excited to get it. There was a gentleman by the name of Gary Craig. He's an electrical engineer trained at Stanford University. Gary Craig saw what this unknown physician, this is going to come to me in 20 minutes after we're finished. This unknown physician was doing, and he was looking at all the meridians, and he saw them as electrical circuits. And he said, you know what? If you tap here on top of your head, here on above your nose, on the edge of your eyebrow, here on the side of your eye, on your temple, here where I keep all my bags for a quick getaway, under your eye, then under your nose, under your lips, on your collarbone, and up on your ribs, you're going to hit 96 to 98% of your meridians and clear the energy. Gary Craig took all of this information that he had developed, put everything out on the internet for free, offered to train people. He actually went, it was working so well that he was bold enough to go to a veterans hospital that had Vietnam vets that had been there 40 years, Paul, medicated and hospitalized for 40 years.
Wow.
Story goes that he worked with them for 1 week and they were fine. They were off medications. They were out of the hospital.
My goodness.
It was amazing. Now, when I heard about it, there's a gentleman by the name of Nick Ortner, Ortner, and I think it's every February he holds something called the Tapping Summit. It's free. All your listeners should go listen to it. It's amazing. He brings in top speakers and psychologists, psychiatrists, all kinds of people.
The Tapping Summit?
The Tapping Summit. I think it's Tapping Solutions Summit. Yeah, but Nick Ortner, if you follow Nick Ortner, and his sister, Jessica Ortner. And so it happened that I was able to watch all 10 days in the year 2010. I bought the book, I bought the DVD, and I had all of these students who came to me and said, Dr. Nall, I only need 1 class left to graduate. I'm like, great, let's get you registered. And they would sit there stone faced. Like they wouldn't even talk to me, Paul. I'm like, what's the class? And they're like, so I get on my computer and I look things up and I'm going, oh, you only have a math class left to finish. How brilliant are you to save the best for last? I'm so proud of you. That was not the way they were thinking at all.
I could only imagine.
Not at all. They were watering the plants in my office with sweat coming off their hands. They were changing. Man. I could see the color change as they're just going up. They were fidgeting and ready to walk out of my office because how dare I suggest that they take a math class. So I took them because they were all desperate. And Paul, you and I know the best clients are desperate because they'll try anything.
Oh yeah. I actually literally just posted about that.
Yeah.
That's one of the ways you are ready for serious change.
Yeah, you got to be desperate. You got to be desperate. Yeah. So they were willing to try anything. So I'd pull them in my office one by one. I'm like, okay, follow me. And I just have them do what I'd read about in the book, what I'd done DVD. And it started working. I mean, one by one, they'd come in and they go, I'm not sure, but I think I'm passing my math class. Paul, I had no idea who was more surprised, them or me. I'm like, you are? What the heck? And so I thought, I better get trained because I don't know what I'm doing here, And I went back to get trained. As it turned out, I had no idea what I was doing, but it was still working. So I went back and I got trained in level 1, level 2, level 3, trauma training, which was really important, quantum training, which has to do with, I guess the term now is intergenerational trauma, but it's also past lives. Very interesting.
Wow.
Supervisor, mentor, picture tapping, which is for people to just draw pictures, and we tap on that until I could finally become a trainer. Because, Paul, once I saw how powerful this was, I'm like, everybody needs to know this tool. It is so amazing. Just to give you an idea of contrast, while I was working full-time at the college, it took me 4 years to earn my Ph.D. in mathematics education.
Yeah.
While I was working full-time at the college, it took me 8 years to become a master trainer in emotional freedom technique. But now
Wow.
I can train people. We just had a training recently where half the class was here in Vero and half the class was online. Oh my gosh, a technology, but it worked. It worked. And it was interesting because everybody got to practice live and hybrid. So that was very, very cool. But that's how I got into it. And I'm wondering, are you up for a demonstration?
Yes, please. Let's do it.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions. Ready?
All right.
Because you know you are going to be my volunteer. Oh, wait a minute. We forgot to talk about that. I'm so sorry.
Wait, talk about what? Remind me, please.
That you were going to be the volunteer.
You know what? I probably missed that email.
Yeah, you may have missed that email I forgot to send. Okay, anyway. So I would treat you like a new client. You by this time you would have completed a discovery form for me, so we'd have some idea what we're doing. But I will ask you for demonstration purposes a number of questions. So Paul, I'm going to ask you in less 24 to 48 hours, what has caused you just a little bit of waffles? Something has caused you to be worried, anxious,
Hmm.
fearful, frustrated, lethargic, exhausted, or stressed.
Well, I'm in the midst of preparing to release my online course, my first one, and it's a big deal to me.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of inner what's the technical term I'm missing here? It's not coming to me. But there are a lot of hurdles in my mind mentally where, just kind of blocking myself from being excited and being motivated to get it out there. Like I
Yeah.
know the value, I know it has potential, but there's a lot of fear there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of man, am I actually capable of this? So
Oh,
far it's really helping people, but this is so much, such a bigger scale for me. So that's the most recent one. That's a big one for me.
great, great. So, Paul, when was the last time that you felt that way?
Ooh, um, probably yesterday afternoon, like around 3, and
What
as I
was
was
going on
working on it.
yesterday after you were working on it yesterday
Yeah,
afternoon?
I was filming.
Okay, so you mentioned two feelings. I'm going to go back and ask you which one's stronger. You mentioned fear and you also mentioned self-doubt. Which one is stronger?
I love these questions. They're hard, but in a good way. Um, I think self-doubt is probably the bigger one in this
Okay.
regard.
So we'll take care of fear later, but right now for self-doubt, when you focus right now today, when you think about yesterday at 3 and it just seemed like there were so many hurdles and you have the self-doubt yesterday, from the top of your head to the bottom of your toes, where do you feel the self-doubt in your body?
Probably more in my chest area, like upper body around here. Yeah.
Okay. And from 0 to 10, where 0 is like, no big deal. I've seen what other people are putting out. I can do just as well. And 10 is the highest amount of self-doubt you've ever had in your life. How much self-doubt do you feel right now thinking about yesterday?
I'm probably at about 5,
5.
4 or
Okay.
5, somewhere around there.
Okay. And is this a true statement? Right here, right now, I feel safe.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you to repeat words. First, I'm going to show you all the spots we're going to tap, and I'm going to ask you to repeat words. If I ask you to repeat something and you go, wait a minute, I would have used different words or something, because you told me it was your chest, your upper body. But if
Yeah.
I said it was your heart chakra, that's not what you said at all. So would you repeat things in your own words for me?
Sure.
Okay, great. Okay. So we'll start off for your listening audience. And if anyone's driving, pause here and pick up later on, because we don't want you doing this while you're driving. So take one hand, doesn't matter if it's right or left hand, and have the look into the palm. And in that area between your wrist and your little finger, you're going to use 4 fingers of the other hand and tap right there. So you have, I happen to have 4 fingers of my right hand tapping into the soft area of my left hand between my wrist and my little finger. Now, Paul, when I add words, we're going to have 3 sentences that we'll say there, okay?
Okay.
Next place is at the top of your head. And similarly, you can use one hand or the other hand, or you can do both hands. It doesn't matter. Okay. And then the next one, I'm going in for a close-up, so warning. Okay, so above your nose, right on the edge of your eyebrow. Yeah, I took my glasses off so that you could see better. Above your nose on the edge of your eyebrow. So right there. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Two fingers there. And then the next place is on the temple between the edge of your eye and your hairline. And you can use one hand or the other or both, or you can, it doesn't matter. And then, like I said, the next spot is where I keep all my bags for a quick getaway, and that's under your eyes.
Keep a few there too.
Yeah. And then the next spot is under your nose, above your lip. I'm going to tap there. The mustache area, right? And then under the lip, above the chin. And you can keep breathing while you're doing this. That's a good idea. And then we're going to cross our wrists and go right on our collarbone and tap there. And then the last spot, Paul, is about 4 inches under our arms, right on our ribs. We're going to give our ribs a good hearty thump. So it goes, woo! And you can do one-handed or the other hand, or give yourself a hug, or come in from the side. It doesn't matter. Any of them are good. So those are the spots we're going to be tapping. You ready?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So on the side of the hand, we're going to tap, and you're going to repeat after me. And for those of you who are listening and not driving, come along with us, and I'll tell you what borrowing benefits is. And we'll say, even though I have this big launch coming up.
I have this big launch coming up.
For this online class. And yesterday around 3. I remember all the hurdles that were there. And thinking about it now. I feel this self-doubt in my chest and my upper body. Right here, right now, I feel safe. We'll do 2 more sentences. Even though. I remember yesterday around 3. So many hurdles trying to get that launched. And thinking about it now. I have my upper torso and chest are full of self-doubt. Right here, right now, I feel safe. Even though my chest and upper torso have all this self-doubt. When I think about yesterday at 3. And all the hurdles for this online course. Right here, right now, I feel safe anyway. And then top of the head. This self-doubt in my chest and upper torso. And then above your nose on the edge of your eyebrow, this self-doubt in my chest and upper torso. On the side of your eye, between your eye and your hairline, this self-doubt on my chest and upper torso. Under your eye, this self-doubt in my chest and upper torso. Under the nose, this self-doubt in my chest and upper torso. Under the lips, all this self-doubt in my chest and upper torso. And then on your collarbone, cross your arms, this self-doubt in my chest and upper torso. And then under your arms, this self-doubt in your chest and upper torso. And then put your hands on your shoulders, and we're going to take a big breath out like a cartoon character. It goes like this. Now, if you have a drink of water, take a sip of water. I'll tell you why later. And then let me ask you, Paul, when you think about yesterday around 3 and all the hurdles that you have to launch this course from 0 to 10, where 0 is like, no big deal. I've seen what some of the other people are doing. And 10 is the most self-doubt you've had in your entire life. Where's your self-doubt now?
I can't feel any. And it's no, wait, I have to just for a moment. Give me a second here, Dr. Katie, because I have to process this.
I can't tell you how much I love this.
just for anyone listening, I'm very transparent. I'm very honest. Yeah, hence I'm willing to do this. I genuinely feel zero anxiousness, self-doubt, or even fear about it. There are just no negative feelings that I can feel about it. Like my body feels different. This is weird. This is okay. All right.
So let me tell you, while you kind of regroup, let me tell you why you drink water. There are studies that show that when we tap on our body at any place, we actually are giving individual cells electrical charges. And they have found that healthy cells have a high electrical charge. Disease and ill and weak cells, the electrical charge goes down. So when we're tapping on anything, we're actually creating an energy shift of just by itself. We all know that electricity travels better in water than yes. So while we are tapping at the end of what we just did was what I would call a round of tapping. And can you imagine doing that for an hour? It's like so cool.
I'd imagine I'd probably melt. That's what I can imagine. And
Well,
by the end of it, I'd just be so relaxed.
Exactly. Yeah, some people want to go to sleep. The most common response I get, Paul, after a 1-hour session is, I feel so light.
Yeah.
Now, no one walks in here and says, I am so heavy. Like nobody even, that's the emotional bankruptcy. They don't even know
Yeah.
that
It's not even a thought.
No. And it's not until you're out of it that you go, oh, this feels good. I want more of this.
Yeah. My goodness. That was amazing. What I'm feeling now is amazing. Thank you.
Yes.
I never had an experience like that before.
I know. So now the other thing you can do after your 16 ounces of freshly squeezed lemon water is you can tap on all your waffles that you're having in the morning. And as you tap, you're going to be relaxed, you're going to be energized, you're going to be refreshed, and you will be able to fly through all of the things you have to do during the day.
My goodness. So listen, if you guys are listening and you're taking notes, or if you weren't taking notes before, you really should. It's different to talk about it experientially. After you've literally had the anxiety kicked out of you, or the doubt kicked out of you. This is some serious stuff. Wow.
Yes. Now, can you see why it was critical for me to become a trainer? Because what I'm doing is training others. We have like an 8-hour session that, I do on Zoom and everything. So people can learn to do this themselves. I am not a medical physician. I am not somebody who can prescribe. I cannot tell people what to do or what not to do. I can give you reports of people who had been diagnosed as depressed and were taking antidepressants. And once they discovered tapping, they were able to work with their medical provider and reduce, and in some cases, eliminate their medical prescription.
Yeah. That's so cool. And I 100% believe it. I think it's so important that we talk about these alternative methods that really shouldn't even be considered alternative, in my opinion, but they're just not talked about that often, or often enough.
Which is why I think my second TEDx talk was never published. My second TEDx talk was science is not always the truth.
I can understand why they'd push back against that.
Yeah, they pushed back big time on that one. And then I discovered that there's a whole bunch of other TEDx talks that were, people, I invested 6 months of my time. I paid for coaches, I paid for things, and I got up on stage and they videoed the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I can't get that video because I signed a contract. I understand it belongs to TED.
Yeah.
But I have the talk. So once I have another platform, I will give the talk again.
Yeah, I would love to hear it because so I'm a big believer, clearly I'm a person of faith, right? I believe in God and all of that, and I understand that not everyone does, and I definitely respect that. But I'm also a big believer in science and making sure that we listen to and understand it and use that information correctly. But I 100% believe that there are plenty of things that
Oh, yeah.
it's just not always the answer. There are other more. I'm uh, I'm dancing on thin ice here, I'm sure, but there are
You're doing
other,
fine.
I think, better alternatives to
Well,
some,
and here's
some
the
of what we
thing,
deal with.
Paul. Yeah, here's the thing, Paul. We don't have enough tools or information right now to measure all the things that may or may not be working.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a great example. In my talk, I talk about Dr. Semmelweis. He
Okay.
was a Hungarian physician who was put in charge of two medical clinics. Both of them delivered babies. In one medical clinic, it was run by physicians, and the other one, it was run by midwives. The physician clinic had twice as many
Mortality.
maternal fertilities as have you heard this story? And
I think, I'm not sure.
okay, as the midwives. And so he, being a good scientist, wanted to find out why. So he looked to try to figure out the difference. Well, the biggest difference was the midwives only delivered babies. That's all they did. Whereas at the physician clinic, they also conducted autopsies. At that time, the gentlemen physicians
I
would go
remember
from the
this.
autopsy straight down to deliver healthy babies.
I
Some
remember
of
this
whom
one.
started dying of the same thing that the autopsies were from. And it wasn't until Dr. Semmelweis's best friend was nicked by a scalpel of one of the students who had done an autopsy, and his friend died of the same thing, that he thought, I wonder if something is following these. So he had the audacity to instruct gentlemen physicians to
Yeah.
wash their hands with soap and water, and I think he actually had bleach too, before they delivered the babies. Well, once they did that, the infant mortality and the maternal fatality dropped to the same level at both places.
Yeah.
And
And
then the entire medical community went nuts. How dare you insinuate that our gentlemen physicians be dirty and insist that they wash their hands? So he got no support on this. And
mhm.
he chanted this loud
He
and
got a
long.
lot of pushback, if I remember that, if I remember it right.
Tons. Yeah. To the point where his peers invited him to inspect this new hospital, which was not a new hospital. It was a new insane asylum, and they committed him there, where
Mm,
he died 2 weeks later of beatings from the guards.
yeah.
Um, it was decades later.
For telling people to wash their hands.
Yeah,
It's mind blowing. Yeah, I
yeah,
just needed to
it was
clarify that.
decades later when Pasteur discovered germs, and he could give a name and a reason for why you're washing your hands. And so it's just like when you said, how does tapping work? And I
Mhm.
had a smart alecky report saying, we don't know. What we do know is that clinical studies have shown that when you're under stress, your cortisol and your adrenal levels go up. We do know that under tapping, it drops your cortisol and it drops your adrenal. So we have had clinical studies that Dr. Peta Stapleton out of Bond University in Australia has done research where her focus is on weight loss. And she does MRIs, and she can see a huge difference in in her clients after tapping. Yeah. So there are some things we know. We can see the results. We don't know why.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's remembering what science is meant to be, right? It's the
Questions.
exploration of the known world,
Yeah. And
right?
it's questions.
That's all it is. And I had I've had a few conversations now with folks, some of which are, are in the field of science and have been for a while, who are getting pushback on some of the research that they're doing or trying to introduce, because it goes against what's been popularly taught or thought
Mhm.
for however long.
Right.
And because of the fear of having to potentially change what has been already established, there's a lot of pushback there, as opposed to, and I, you know, if you're a scientist and you're listening and you really think I'm off on this, I invite you to reach out. I'd love to have a conversation with you. But I would argue that that's unscientific. Like, if you're a scientist, you should be interested in knowing more and exploring, even if your assumption is X, you should be willing to test that assumption. I think that's true scientific approach. But that could just be me.
And Paul, I would suggest that what you just proposed was a sign of intelligence.
Oh, thank you.
It's just always asking questions, right? And being
Yeah.
curious. Wasn't that our job? Our job was to be curious as children.
Yeah.
And some of us think that once we hit a certain age, a certain height, a certain level, that we no longer have to ask questions. Well, if you're not asking questions, look at nature. If you look at
Yeah.
nature, you're either growing or dying. That's it.
Yeah.
So guess what? If you're not asking questions, guess what's happening? You're not growing.
Quite literally, right? Like the brain, if you're not keeping your brain active, it literally begins to deteriorate.
Yeah.
You have to actively engage and exercise your brain muscle, so to
Yeah.
speak, if you're going to keep it vibrant.
Yeah.
So that, again, these are things that I really wish was talked about more often, because we say that and it sounds like, oh, that's such an arbitrary, ethereal, just hovering kind of idea. It's like, no, these are very tangible things,
Yeah.
very tangible. So I do want to ask you one more question before uh jumping to wherever the conversation ends up wrapping up. Um, you're also a DISC certified human behavior consultant,
Mhm.
correct? Uh, what kind of work does that entail? I saw that you work with teams, you work with schools, businesses, organizations, CEOs. I mean, uh, all across the spectrum.
It turns out, Paul, each of us are born with a personality. Would you
Surprise,
agree?
surprise.
I know. I mentioned earlier that we have three wonderful kids, and they were each blessed with different personalities. I struggled with my oldest one. He and I were like at odds all the time until I did research and tried to ask questions, trying to figure out what was going on. And then I discovered DISC. And I went, oh my gosh, this explains so much. A very simple explanation is you ask two questions, and based on the answers of two questions, you can identify what of four types of personalities they are. And then you can communicate on a level that people can understand.
Yeah.
The two questions are pretty easy. I use this every day at the college, especially students would come in and say, oh, I don't know what I want to study. I'm like, got it. And usually, because I've been doing it for so long, as they walk in the door, I could see, and I was like, okay, all right, I got this one pegged. I know what it is.
Yeah.
But the two questions are, one is, do you think you're more extrovert or introvert? And what do you think you are, Paul?
I'm definitely introvert.
I would agree. And there's two. The second question is, if you had a choice of how to spend the day, would you spend the day getting things checked off the list, making sure you're knowing where you're going, who you're going to be with, what we're going to be eating, what is the plan, where are we going, how are we going to be there? Or are you just like, just hanging with people?
Oh, I'm a list maker.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a list maker.
So from those two questions, you get four different. Remember the part where I told you I was really lazy? This helps me be so lazy. I have four different personality types that are described. One, and they are DISC for short
Mhm.
for discovery. So the D personality is the extrovert, detail oriented. So it'd be an extroverted form of you. And that's somebody who would like to be in charge. It doesn't matter if somebody else already is in charge, but luckily I'm here, so I'm going to take over. And you can just like take 2 steps back and follow everything I tell you to do. That's the kind of personality it is. And we're very excited to have that personality in the world, because otherwise we wouldn't know who to follow. So that's one personality. The extrovert kind of hang out with people person, that is our creative person. That is our star. That is our, like, I want to be the center of attention, and I could do all of this, and just, oh, wait a minute, I might be late for everything. And if I have a purse, I've got like this huge purse, and there's happens to be everything in it, because, you just never know when you're going to need it. And then the people version of you would be a S personality, and those are the people that their only goal is to make sure everybody in the room is happy. And if everybody in the room is happy, then I will feel so satisfied, but I've got to have everybody happy. And so those are our kumbaya people, and we love them because they hold us all together with all our different kinds of strengths. And then your personality, we call a C, or cautious personality. It's really hard to make decisions. And the reason why it's so hard to make decisions is because you never have enough information. And once you make a decision, you have to go back and double check your decision, because it may be wrong. And the worst thing that could possibly happen is you make a wrong decision. Once you know about each of these personalities, not just for yourself, because that's part of the presentation I make, is identifying the personality you are, but then you can identify all the other personalities very quickly. So the son that we were in combat with, I recognized him as having a D personality. He liked to be in charge. So what do you do with somebody who likes to be in charge? Even if they're a youngster, you give them something to be in charge with. So I would turn to him and say, you can go to bed at either 8:15 or 8:30. Which would you decide? You can either clear the table or empty the dishwasher. Which would you like to do?
Yeah.
And so once you give them decisions that they would like to do, it's like this personality shortcut, And I mean, I've done all the other tests on everything else, but I love this, because it's 2 questions. Based on the 2 questions, I can immediately know that everything that I've told you, you're probably making notes on everything, and you're going to research every person that I talked about. And you're going to have more questions, and you'll probably follow up with me, and that'll be fine. I'd love to do that. And so you're somebody that, the detail is all in the details. You would be somebody I'd want to be piloting the plane going across the ocean, because you're not going to take that plane full of people up until every T is crossed and every I is dotted. That I personality that's like all creative and everything wouldn't be too keen on having that person. But you think about different careers. You think about a physician. A physician, you kind of want him to be like your personality, right? You want him to be checking all the details and double checking everything.
Yeah.
But remember Robin Williams in that movie Patch Adams about the physician? He was a non-traditional physician. Why? Because he was exuberant and he was out there. And so when you think of these different things, you think of like somebody who's a leader. You think of a personality, you're like, oh my gosh, I can see it. Now, any one of those personalities can be leaders. And like the one that is the star of the show, you think about Walt Disney or Dolly Parton. And they're still strong leaders. And you think about an S, you think of Mahatma Gandhi, who was very quietly conducting change. You think about from your personality, Bill Gates. Bill Gates is very detail oriented. And from the large personalities, we can all think of leaders who have the large personality, who I'm going to be in charge right now. So yeah. Is that awesome?
That's really cool. Yeah, that's really, really cool. I'm a big fan of spending time discovering this stuff. I'm a big proponent of people investing in learning who they are and how they function, because I like to say that if you never learn to understand your personality, you will always be a victim of it as opposed to a master of it. So you'll never know. You ever hear people say, oh, I just kind of do this, I don't really know why, I just know I always do it. It's like, well, now your personality is kind of happening to you.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
opposed to you being able to say, oh, well, this is why I do this. And then you can
Yeah.
make an informed decision. And,
Yeah.
that's my personality type, right? Being informed as to whether or not you want to continue doing that thing as far as your reasons why.
Right.
But that I'm a big proponent of that. And so I love that. And I
Yeah.
love being able to, I love the fact that you're equipping people to function from that place, because I really do believe you live a very different life when you're conscious of how you're wired, because you can make decisions based on how you actually function. That's a big deal.
And I think that that key word there, Paul, is being conscious,
Yeah.
which takes us right back to emotional wealth, and it takes
Yep.
us back to and just being conscious of who we are, what strengths we have that we don't even know,
Hmm.
and where are our potholes that we run
Yeah.
into, and how do we avoid them so we don't keep running into the same potholes.
Yeah.
You know?
Because the reality is, if you're gonna care for yourself, well, you got to know yourself.
Right.
It's I think I might have posted something along these lines where it's like, you can't care for someone you don't know. You can bodyguard for someone you don't know, because you're just keeping them alive, right? Like, you don't need to know their strengths or
Oh my
weaknesses or their
God,
wiring. You can
that's
bodyguard, you can keep them alive,
huge.
but you can't care for them. Like, if you're babysitting your friend's kid or your niece or whatever, you want to know their strengths or weaknesses. What lights them up? What do they actually enjoy doing? What are the emotional deposits, and what are the emotional withdrawals? If you don't know that about yourself, you can't care for yourself very well. In the same way, you wouldn't be able to care for anyone else very well if you didn't know them very well.
I love that analogy. That is like so descriptive. I'm going to steal it. The
Oh,
first
go
time I'll
for
give you credit, and then after that,
it.
it's mine.
Oh, I go for it. I live in the idea that I don't own any of these ideas. I just happen to be the conduit sometimes that shares them.
Yeah.
Um, but I really have enjoyed our conversation, Dr.
Oh,
Katie. This has been
I
so
do
much
too.
fun.
I do too. We're going to
If
stay in
people
touch.
want to get in contact with you, they want you to take them through a round of tapping, or come to their organization and help them figure out how to communicate in a way that reduces the stress and just the negative aura in their environment. Where do they look for you? How do they find you?
So they can email me. I'm at hello@drnall.com. That's HELLO@DRNALL.com. I'm on all social media as Katie Nall, PhD, because, oh my gosh, I worked so hard for that. So that's KATIENALL, PhD. And so that's on all social media. I'm a bit of a wordsmith. So my website is my last name, Nall, followed by the word edge, EDGE, and then CO for company. So it becomes
I,
knowledgecompany.com.
I love that. When I first got to it, I was like, oh, that is so cool.
Oh, yeah. So
But
they can also call me. I would love to have any of your listeners call me. They can call me at area code 772-226-0167. And then just call and visit. And if I'm not there, leave me a nice message and I'll call back when I can.
awesome. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you making yourself available for those who are listening. And I hope you guys who are listening have had as much fun as I have with this conversation. I mean, I this was genuinely a joy. And I really, really enjoyed it. Uh, thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Null.
Oh, Paul, it's been my pleasure and honor. Thank you so much. And you know what? I really appreciate what you're doing in the world, and your contribution is very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, guys, that is it for this episode. And oh my goodness, I hope you go back and listen to it again, because this was so much fun. I will see you in the next one. Take care, everybody. That's it for today's episode. I truly hope you enjoyed the show. To learn more about today's guests, including the links and resources related to everything we discussed, visit the podcast page at paulwcroswell.com, where you can find the entire podcast archive, as well as information about my book titled Life Balance, as well as the Life Balance Planner, and much, much more. If you'd like to support the podcast, the easiest and most impactful thing that you can do is subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on YouTube. Also, leaving a positive review or comment is also important and greatly appreciated. Sharing the show or your favorite episode with friends or on social media is, of course, awesome and very helpful. Finally, for podcast updates, special offers on the Life Balance Planner, online courses, and more, please subscribe to our newsletter. You can find a link to do so in the show notes.